Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Marchant on our auspicious centenary. As most of you will know, we're a 4-generation family business, and it's been an amazing journey to reach 100 years as a family company. So we've all been very proud and humbled by the experience. I want to start my talk, which is the main part of my talk, about the Centenary Exhibition of the 3 legendary Qing dynasty emperors, Kangxi, Yongzheng and Qianlong. And I'll start with a thought, and then I'll ask you to shelve the thought. The thought is, how do you establish not just a reign, how do you establish a dynasty? And that's the question for tonight. And I want you to shelve that thought for 3 or 4 minutes. And I'm going to tell you a story. And the story starts in 1991, which was a similar moment to celebrate an exhibition at Marchant's. And it was our 3rd exhibition of a similar subject, that of Qing Imperial porcelain. The catalogue was brilliantly written by this gentleman standing right here, David S. Friedman, Cambridge educated and a brilliant writer. And the subject wasn't quite the same. It was 19th century Qing Imperial porcelain. The previous 2 exhibitions in 81 and 84 had been predominantly 18th century with some 19th century. But this 1991 exhibition was only 19th century Qing Imperial porcelain. And on the preview, not quite tonight, probably let's say like yesterday, a world famous art historian and journalist made an appointment with my legendary father to preview the exhibition for his newspaper, which was world famous and sold internationally. He comes in, and I'm a younger man than I am today, and I'm hiding in the corner, 1991. And my father says, welcome. I'm not going to mention any names. And he comes in. David may have been even present as well at the time. And he comes in and he goes, Mr. Marchant, what's all this 19th century stuff? Isn't it all rubbish? Yeah, you remember. And my father, brilliantly and calmly, turned round to this famous art historian and journalist and said, Mister, if you don't like this, you have no appreciation of Chinese Ming imperial porcelain. That was actually how he stated it to this person. And the man was quite taken aback, and I'm hiding in the corner. And the man was, and of course the guy was a genius, and the penny immediately dropped. And he said, he knew what my father was insinuating. And what he was clearly insinuating was that to establish a dynasty or a reign, but a dynasty, you need to have an appreciation of what went before you. And of course, all those designs, or a lot of the designs, on that 19th century Imperial exhibition were clearly designs that had come before. The Manchus who established the Qing dynasty wanted to show they weren't heathens. They weren't just foreign rulers who had taken over from the Mings. They wanted to show that they had an appreciation and an understanding of what went before them. And what is the most famous, literally, commodity of China? What is China so famous for? What did China invent 250 years high-fired that could retain liquid, that keep it warm, that the West didn't invent till Botger or early Meissen? Ceramics. That's what China was so world famous for, and what everybody in the world wanted: Chinese ceramics. So the great Kangxi emperor, as a young man, realizes the way to legitimize the reign was to paint designs and styles that had appeared in Ming porcelain as early as the Yongle period in the early 15th century. I'm going to try and start in some sort of order. The most popular and famous animal in China is the dragon. And number one, the little bottle vase over there, beautifully elegant shape, is painted with a dragon. Now, this is one of the earliest Kangxi marked pieces that we have in the exhibition, and it's legitimizing by painting it with a dragon. The special feature about this vase is that it's also painted in underglazed copper red, the most difficult color ever to fire as an underglazed color in Chinese history. So they've already started to open the kilns again. They've already got Imperial patronage at the kilns again. They're employing special people from approximately 1681 to supervise the kilns. They want the temperatures controlled. They want the colours controlled. And they really want to show that they can manufacture the ceramics to a new super level. So there's a lovely Kangxi bottle vase. A tiny bit later is the Kangxi bowl, also with the dragon on it, which Marchants were lucky enough to handle. Again, David would know the bowl. It was in our first major refurb of this very building in 1980. We had an exhibition, 1 litre Kangxi, and that bowl was in the exhibition. We sold it to a local family in Holland Park, and almost 40 plus years later, the family sold it, and we were lucky enough to buy it back. It might even have the label on with David's writing on it, with his numbering. Okay, so we've mentioned a little bit about Kangxi. The partner to that bowl is iron red, and there's only 3 other recorded copies of that bowl, known examples, and one in Taipei. And it's really worth looking at that iron red dragon. It's painted in an exquisite way. And again, Kangxi Marken period. Again, a lovely history. We sold it to the banker Robin Herridge. I can say his name because his name was published in the Hong Kong catalogue when he sold the bowl in the 80s. We bought it back, and again we sold it to the same people in Holland Park, and they recently sold it, and I was so delighted, and I know Samuel was delighted to buy that Kangxi bowl back. So we've mentioned a little bit about Kangxi, but we haven't really focused on some of the designs that again show the legitimacy of the reign. So the star piece in the exhibition and the front cover piece is number 18, this incredible Yongzheng Mark and Period bottle vase. It's painted with a classic, what you would think is a Yongle or Schwander design, flowers, here representing 12 different flower heads of the months. But why does this differ from the Yongle or the Xuande designs with flowers? And I'll quickly tell you. When you look at a Yongle dish, and you can all go and see some in the market this week, some very special ones, they have what's called a heaped and piled effect. The heaped and piled effect is when the edges of the flowers or the petals or in any certain areas, it looks a bit blotchy. And that was a natural effect. That is how the Yongle dishes came out the kiln, and they had this effect that was coined by Western people many, many years later, and it's much loved and greatly admired. But the Yongzheng potters, under the supervision of people like Tang Ying, specially ordered by the old Yongzheng emperor, because he was old. His father had reigned for 60 years, the longest reign in Chinese history. And Yongzheng comes to the throne as an old man, but again with a massive appreciation of art, of what went before him. In fact, Yongzheng was known to love Sung ceramics, and ordered many Yongzheng copies of Sung ceramics with the Sung glazes. I just go off track a tiny bit. So here, what's about Yongzheng? They've deliberately made it heaped and piled. It hasn't come out the kiln that way. These artisans are so incredible, they're so talented that they can actually make it look like the heaped and piled effect of the early 15th century. I've got to mention a bit about history and provenance, because that is so fundamental to everything that Marchant does these days. It's become exactly what I said, so important. This piece was purchased by my father around 1965. He loved it his whole life, and he never wanted to part with it. But on the 27th of November 1976, he gave a paper, a lecture, to the Hong Kong Oriental Ceramic Society. And in that lecture, everyone was lucky enough to gain some of his incredible knowledge and experience, which he'd gained as a young man, and which he'd learnt from his father before him. But my father had this true passion and love for Qing Imperial porcelain, because he realized the technical brilliance of it, and he realized that the kilns had been supervised, and that the whole process had been much more meticulously looked into. So in his lecture to the Hong Kong Oriental Ceramic Society in November 76, he publishes this piece. And it's the first time that anyone had seen it. In fact, people almost had never seen a Yongzheng example of this. So, and that was the last time this piece had been ever seen. In the paper that he gave, he also, on the same day, illustrated this pair of Yongzheng bowls. Now, this pair of Yongzheng bowls are painted in what we call the reverse technique. It's quite an interesting design. It must have been a stencil or a pattern that was pre-drawn by these incredible artists and craftsmen, and then it's painted on the porcelain. But what is painted on the porcelain? Only the iron red. The bamboo, the white, is the white glaze. It's left in reverse. So that's really incredible. And we believe that this design is invented in Yongzheng. There's innovation going on now in China. It's not just inspiration and appreciation, it's innovation. And this design is a new Yongzheng design. And very much like the vase next to it, after Yongzheng reigned for only 12 years, 1723 to 1735, because he was an old man after his father reigned for 60 years, the Qianlong emperor comes to the throne. Now, the Qianlong emperor he's inherited now what is an incredibly successful and strong country. And he really wants to stamp his authority, his love of history, and his own name on the Qing dynasty. So he orders lots of these bowls in Qianlong and lots of these vases with various different patterns in Qianlong, because he realizes his dad, Yongzheng, loved these things and he wants lots of them in the palace. He wants to be able to use them and eat from them and see them with his name on, with Qianlong's name on. And he redoes the Gugong, the Forbidden City, which is the first time it's been majorly overhauled in a way since the Ming Dynasty, and since Yongle laid out the plans for the Gugong and the Forbidden City. So Qianlong comes to the throne and he's got new ideas, or his potters and his artisans and his craftsmen have got new ideas, and they expand the Famel Rose palette, which you see on the ruby ground vase. But again, they love the previous designs, and the Doucai pieces are based on 15th century and Chenghua originals. So even these designs are inspired by the Chenghua designs of the 15th century, but they're technically incredible because the kilns have been controlled at certain temperatures. The painting has been supervised. If it wasn't good enough for the emperor, it got discarded. Some pieces that had blurs or faults did sneak out the back door, but the main pieces that were good enough for the emperor went to the court and palace for use and decoration. There's a wonderful bowl in the window of Qianlong, and Natalie did a beautiful video a few weeks ago talking about that bowl, how it's carved with the abundances, the three fruits. And the interesting thing about that bowl is it differs from this, because you can find them in Yongzheng, in celadon, in lavender, but actually, ironically, for some reason, there's less of them in Qianlong. And that's an early Qianlong example, very like the Yongzheng ones. But imagine throwing a slab of clay that size, and it really is a special piece. Just want to finish my little talk on the exhibition with a couple of other notes. And another incredible provenance is this yellow ground stem bowl. This was on the front cover of a New York catalogue, and we all fell in love with it. And the provenance was absolutely astounding. It had come from the collection of Russell Tyson, who many of you will know the name. He was the main benefactor of the Chicago Art Institute, and there's one of the big halls in the Chicago Art Institute with his name on. But as is the want in America, to the benefit of collectors, dealers, and everyone else, we are lucky that American institutions do sometimes deaccession pieces. And so we had the opportunity to put our heads on the block and buy this incredible Qianlong Markham period lemon yellow ground We know of no other examples with a lemon yellow ground. We've seen a few blue and white ones, but we've never seen a lemon yellow ground. And if you like lemon yellow ground with underglazed blue, there's the most extraordinary cabinet of these pieces in the Bohr connection in Geneva. Alfred Bohr bought all his pieces in the early part of the 20th century, recommended by a gentleman called Tomita. He sent him cables and weird posting pictures, and most of the pieces that Tomita recommended to Bohr he purchased. And there's a whole cabinet in the Bohr which I recommend you all travel and visit. And I think it might be under renovation at the moment. Someone mentioned that to me today, so please check before you go. And that stem bowl would not be out of place in that cabinet at the Bohr. Thank you very much. It was a brief talk. I could go on. I tried this talk out on Monday or Tuesday to a wonderful group of students from the Courtauld Institute, and it did go on a bit longer, so excuse me for cutting it short, because I do want to just mention for 5 minutes about the 100-year book, because so many people have approached me and asked me, and some people have criticized that I may have announced it too early, but yesterday was crazy here. Each book is 10 kilos, so you can work out the volumes. And their books arrived. It was 2.5 tons of books. And the staff, the incredible staff here at Marchant, managed to get out 180 copies by yesterday afternoon. And people are calling me and emailing me all over the world saying, oh, mine's being tracked by FedEx. And ironically, most of them were pre-orders. So we hope to make the people very happy that when they receive their 100-year book. What is this 100-year book? Why did I do it? Where did I think of it? How did it? And there is a simple answer to the question. I was a young 13-year-old in 1976, and my father showed me Maoyama's book 70 Years, which is an extraordinary production, and every library of Chinese art should have a copy of it. And we always looked through it. I'm not trying to compete with it. There's too many world treasures in it. But it inspired me, and I just had that moment as a crazy young 13-year-old that I thought, gosh, if Marchant ever gets to 100, I'd love to do a similar thing. Similar only in size, because my dream was that it would fit in people's library next to Maoyama's book of 70 years. There were 1 or 2 other books over the years that I've also taken inspiration from in this production, which has taken me 7 years. And throughout that 7 years, with difficulty, especially during COVID, when I managed to have the stock books at home, but I didn't have the day books at home, and I didn't have access to our library. Occasionally, if I was really stuck, I just snuck in and went to the library and did 4 or 5 hours research. But the second book that inspired me was by another legend of this business. In fact, they're all legends, the inspiration, was Anthony de Boulay. I knew Anthony very well. He just left Christie's when I started at Christie's, and they kindly, I worked for 2 years there. My father insisted I work for 5 years outside of the business, which was, in hindsight, very, very wise. And my last 2 years were spent at Allen Hartman, the legendary dealer in New York. And Anthony de Boulay wrote a book called Christie's Pictorial History. And it's not the easiest book to navigate. It has this unbelievable index that's quite difficult to navigate. But it's an amazing illustration of all the Chinese porcelain that Christie's handled. And my last inspiration, and I must give a nod to Giuseppe Eskenazi, the greatest dealer of our generation that we've ever come across. And Giuseppe wrote a book over 10 years ago. Yesterday, he kept calling me like 3 times, and last night and today. And he's just said, well done. It's the most incredible production I've ever seen in my life. And the thing is about Marchant 100 Years, no one has done a book quite like it. Okay, it's hard work, because a lot of it is lists. We bought these things here, we sold these things here, we bought all those things there, we sold all those things there. But amongst it all are some amazing stories about people, about clients. Gerald Reitlinger, who gave his pieces to the Ashmolean Museum. Carew Shaw, one of the first chaps like Max Robinson, who was the commentator at Wimbledon, who collected Kangxi and Transitional, and of course a nod to Sir Michael Butler and a nod to other great collectors like Dr. Lowell Young and Bertil Hogström and all these great people that have been patrons of Marchant over the years. And they're all mentioned in the book. They've all got something about them, and there's a picture of a young Lowell Young in the book in front of his collection, and there's some amazing pictures of my parents in Kyoto in the 1960s, in Shinmonsen, and I hope you love the book. Those of you that have pre-ordered, it's on its way to you, so anyone who wants me to sign a copy, and Natalie and Samuel, and lastly, I have to give a nod to the staff at Marchant, particularly Dilara, who left Marchant to have a baby. She really helped me over the years with the editing. To Lucy, who's been amazing, stepping into Dilara's shoes with the editing, and to Natalie. Well, Natalie did more for this book than anyone else. She somehow managed to correlate over 2,000 images of Chinese porcelain, of things that and she said, Dad, you just can't put this image. It's from a 1960s catalogue. I said, Natalie, you've got to put that image in. And we doctored the images to make them fit. And in volume 2, they all fit much nicer. Forgive volume 1, because they're old pictures, and that's what they are. But some of them have got amazing stories, and I hope you all enjoy the book, and I hope it's a useful reference. I mean, there's some amazing pieces on the Guwan 2. It's a nod to Guwan 2 scroll that Natalie and I did in the style of the watercolours of the Guwan 2 scrolls at the British Museum and the V&A. Alas, our one is much smaller and it's digitally watercoloured, but it's fun. It's been a fun thing. Alas, once it went to print, I realised all the treasures I'd missed out on it. But what can you do? Most of them are in the 100-year book. So thanks for coming to Marchant. Thanks for supporting Marchant.